Over the last couple of months, there's been a shift in the focus on our channel, Living Well with Schizophrenia, toward exploring the ketogenic diet and metabolic therapies as a medical intervention for my schizoaffective disorder. Now, this shift has led to some very mixed feelings among you, our audience, and I want to take a minute to address some of the more difficult feelings that are coming up around it. I've gotten a lot of feedback from people who are feeling a degree of upset at the focus on the ketogenic diet and metabolic therapies as a treatment for mental illness. And some of the reasons for this are that they feel that this treatment is inaccessible for a lot of people, too expensive, too difficult, whatever it may be, or they feel it doesn't apply to them. It wouldn't help their personal situation, or they feel that what I'm exemplifying is unattainable for them or for other people. And I want to take a second to empathize with that feeling in the sense of when I started this ketogenic diet and metabolic therapies project, I was not in a place where I was at my lowest in terms of dealing with my mental illness. I was already starting from a pretty high baseline and place of higher capacity. But I remember when I was struggling a great deal more with my mental illness. And I remember how it was, the experience of it was completely enmeshed with feelings of hopelessness, despair, feeling like nothing is ever going to be able to make a difference in the pain that you're feeling and the difficulty of experiencing your mental illness on a daily basis. I remember that. And I understand, I think, why if you yourself find yourself in that, lowest low, or even just in a lower place than where I started out with in your mental health journey, that it could feel hard to hear from someone, oh, just make XYZ changes to your lifestyle and your mental illness will be cured. That I get why that might come across as maybe even a little bit patronizing and hurtful in a sense, and maybe invalidating of the suffering that you're experiencing. And I want to acknowledge that. But what I also want to maybe try to draw your attention to is that when you're operating from that space of hopelessness or powerlessness is ultimately what it boils down to, it really removes the ability or the empowerment you could potentially harness to make changes for yourself that would improve your experience of your illness or your life. And that's a hard thing to do, especially when you're stuck in this space of powerlessness. It's hard to feel like you have any sort of autonomy over these types of changes in your life. I think especially, I can relate to this where I went through a prolonged period of several years where I was doing everything I was supposed to. I was listening to my doctors. I was doing what they were telling me to do, taking my medications, trying ECT, trying all these medical interventions that are, commonplace for the treatment of psychiatric disorders. And it wasn't working. And so it did feel like there was nothing I could do and I couldn't make any changes. And so I understand if that's a space that you find yourself in, and then thus hearing about, these lifestyle changes that are not the status quo, if you will, in the medical community for treating psychiatric disorders, it's easy to just scoff that off and be like, well, that's not going to work either. I think another element of kind of writing off these interventions that I can kind of relate to or empathize with is the idea of, it took me personally over 10 years of working on acceptance around the fact that I live with a chronic mental illness that doesn't have a cure. It's sort of treatable through medication and whatnot, and coming to a place of acceptance of the fact that I was going to need to take this medication that didn't make me feel great for the rest of my life. And this need to accept this kind of feeds into understanding your illness as a part of your identity. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I see this a lot within the mental health community where, for example, people who choose to go by the term schizophrenic, that's really showing that they view it as part of who they are as a person. Or even myself, I've made a YouTube channel and a career around talking about my illness. So inevitably there is a degree of, amalgamation of my identity with living with this illness. And so I get how when that becomes part of your identity, and, part of that identity is being a good patient, taking your medication, listening to what the status quo prescription for treating a psychiatric illness is. When that gets enmeshed with your identity, it can be kind of jarring or hard to be open to the idea of a different way of treating or managing an illness, such as the ketogenic diet or metabolic therapies. And I get that there's also an element that compounds that skepticism or whatnot of this being really new and emerging science. But, what I'm trying to do through this project is, not say you do everything exactly the way I'm doing it and your illness will be cured. That is not at all what I'm trying to do with this project, but more so to provide information and my experience about using an alternative treatment and how it could potentially benefit you. And again, it's not to say follow everything exactly as I do, but more providing an example of how you can kind of harness that empowerment that I was talking about and kind of shed the feeling of powerless that we so often feel when faced with chronic mental illnesses like schizophrenia, and try to take some of that power back and make changes in your life and the way you take care of yourself that will ultimately improve your experience of your illness and hopefully your overall life as well. I think that there's probably also a degree of skepticism with how effective this has been for me so far in terms of I've really been doing this for about 2 months now, and I think I have a degree of skepticism even about how well it's going in terms of I very rarely experience psychotic symptoms or even mood symptoms anymore. And I just feel so much more stable and mentally well than I did before I started this. And I get how that big shift could be hard to believe or hard to wrap your head around. And I do want to take a minute to address the fact that, like I said earlier in this video, I didn't start from my lowest low, experiencing my mental illness. I have put in a lot of preemptive work over the last 8 or so years to get to a place of increased stability within my mental health. And that's something that should not be ignored, because I get that that is not necessarily the exact same starting place as everyone else watching either. I get that we're all on different points in our journey of learning to live with our mental illness or navigating our mental health. And so that's probably important to acknowledge and honor the fact that we're all going to be starting in different places. But I think that the thing that could be taken away as a commonality, hopefully for all of us, is the potential to, find that sense of empowerment and take the power back over how we choose to live our lives and how we choose to take care of ourselves and our mental health. And it's probably also important to acknowledge that this intervention could affect different people differently or have different results for different people. Just like I acknowledge that we're all starting out at different points in our journey, interventions like this could affect people's experience of symptoms differently. It is working really well for me right now, and I'm wanting to share that with you all, but I am still taking psychiatric medication right now, even if it's at a much lower dose. It hasn't completely eradicated all my symptoms in 2 months, and I want to be honest about that too. But again, I just want to draw it back to this empowerment piece of taking ownership over taking care of ourselves. And a lot of the metabolic therapies that we're talking about right now in this project are things that would benefit anyone, regardless of if you have a mental illness or not. Every single human is going to benefit from focusing on having a good sleep protocol and getting good quality sleep. Every single human is going to benefit from exercise and getting physically active. And so Yes, the ketogenic diet as a specific intervention for treating psychiatric illness may have varying results, but a lot of the changes that we're promoting or talking about or showing you that I'm going through would be beneficial for anyone, regardless of a mental illness, but especially if you're navigating living with a mental illness. So I hope talking through some of this helped to address some of the difficult feelings people have been feeling about us taking on this project and making it the focal point of the channel. But that said, we have also experienced some very valid criticisms about the ketogenic diet as a medical intervention that we do feel the need to address further as well. These are things like what happens to cholesterol when you're on a really high-fat diet, things like how following a strict ketogenic diet interplays with things like eating disorders. If this is inaccessible for a lot of people and what the cost is, we actually did a video on that just last week, which you can check out here. I'll link to it. But we are planning to dive deeper into these valid criticisms of the ketogenic diet as a medical intervention and hopefully better address those concerns. So I want to wrap this up just by saying thank you to every single person who has watched our videos over the years and felt some sort of connection to me or to our channel or to the work that we're doing or to the community we're building here. It really means a lot to me. And if you've been having a harder time with the content we're putting out around this ketogenic diet and metabolic therapies and whatnot, and you're feeling maybe a sense of disconnect from the content we used to create or from me or from the community that we're building here, I'm sorry about that. I hope that this video kind of helped to tease out, talking about some of those feelings around that and hopefully help to kind of ease some of those difficult feelings that you may be feeling around this shift in focus. And I do want to say thank you for being honest with us about concerns you have around this project or around the change in content. And we do want to properly address the concerns that you do have. And likewise, if you have been giving us support and cheering us on through this project, thank you very much as well. That also means a lot to me. And yeah, thank you everyone who's watched our videos over the years. Wishing you and your loved ones good health as always. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.